The soft hum of the VR pod filled the dimly lit lab as Ethan adjusted the neural interface, his fingers trembling slightly with excitement. As the startup sequence of Anthropic's latest system initiated, he muttered under his breath, "Let's see what this thing can do." The pod sealed around him, and the familiar lab dissolved, replaced by a vivid alien landscape. Ethan blinked, astonished. Towering crystalline spires reached toward a swirling violet sky. 2 moons hovered on the horizon, casting an eerie glow over the barren terrain. "Whoa," Ethan whispered, slowly spinning in place. Every detail felt hyper-realistic. The crunch of sand underfoot, the faint metallic tang in the air. A distant screech echoed, making him flinch. "Okay, creepy alien world check. Where's the tutorial?" He patted his pockets, searching for an inventory or menu, but found nothing. "Hello? Game guide?" His voice echoed back to him, and an uneasy feeling began to settle in his gut. This was way more immersive than any VR he'd ever tried. Movement caught his eye, a glimpse of blue skin and feathery wings disappearing behind a crystal formation. "Hey, wait!" Ethan shouted, breaking into a run. He slid on the loose sand as he rounded the corner and came to an abrupt halt. Before him stood the most stunningly beautiful creature he had ever seen. Her glowing blue skin seemed to shimmer, her silver hair cascading down her back. Massive, iridescent wings trembled slightly, and her silver eyes locked onto his, sending a chill down his spine. Hi," Ethan stammered, his mouth dry. "I'm Ethan. Are you part of this game?" The woman's brow furrowed in confusion. When she spoke, her voice was melodic, resonating with an otherworldly tone. "Game? I do not understand. I am Seraphine, emissary of the Celestials. Why have you come to our sacred land, human?" Ethan blinked, trying to process. "Wow, this AI is advanced. Right, okay, I'm just testing a new VR system. Gotta say, you're nailing the NPC dialogue." He reached out, expecting some sort of interaction prompt. The moment his fingers brushed her arm, a surge of energy pulsed through him. The world around them blurred, and when his vision cleared, they stood in a vast, glowing chamber filled with strange technology. Seraphine yanked her arm away, her wings flaring in alarm. "What have you done?" "This is the heart of Celestia. Only the highest order of Celestials may enter here." Ethan's head spun. This was all too real. A sinking feeling settled in his stomach. "I didn't do anything. Where are we?" "You have committed a grave offense, human. The Council will not forgive this." Her words were cut off by a blaring alarm. Red lights flashed, and a booming voice echoed through the chamber. "Intruder alert! Unauthorized presence detected in the heart chamber." Panic washed over Ethan. "We need to get out of here now." Without thinking, he grabbed Seraphine's wrist and dragged her toward a glowing pedestal at the center of the room. She shouted for him to stop, but it was too late. Ethan slammed his hand down, and the world dissolved into a flash of light. When the light faded, they were standing in a dense, humid jungle, the air filled with the calls of strange creatures. Seraphine wrenched her arm free, her expression a mix of anger and fear. "Do you realize what you've done? You've activated an ancient portal network that hasn't been used in millennia." Ethan swallowed hard as the reality of the situation sank in. This wasn't a game. Somehow, he had been transported to another world, and he had just kidnapped an alien angel. "Oh no," he whispered, "I am so screwed." Seraphine scanned the surroundings, her wings twitching nervously. "We cannot stay here. The activation of the portal will have alerted the Seraphim and others. We must find shelter and determine a plan." As they moved deeper into the jungle, Ethan couldn't stop glancing at Seraphine. Despite the overwhelming danger, he found himself captivated by her otherworldly beauty. "So, you're like an alien angel?" he asked. She shot him an exasperated look. "I'm a celestial, yes. Though I suspect your primitive understanding cannot grasp the complexity of my kind." "Hey, I've watched every episode of Ancient Aliens," Ethan quipped, then immediately regretted it as Seraphine's brow furrowed. "Your attempts at humor are confusing," she replied, though a small hint of curiosity flickered in her eyes. "But I sense no malice in you. Tell me, Ethan, how did you come to Celestia?" As they trekked through the dense foliage, Ethan explained how he'd been testing a VR system. Seraphine listened, occasionally asking questions that made him realize just how advanced her civilization was. A fascinating tale, she mused. It seems the boundaries between our realities are more fragile than we believed. This could have serious consequences for the balance of power in our galaxy. Before Ethan could respond, a monstrous creature burst from the trees, towering over them with writhing limbs and gnashing teeth. "Run!" Seraphine shouted. They sprinted through the jungle, the creature hot on their heels. Just as Ethan's legs were about to give out, they stumbled onto a cliffside. "There!" Seraphine pointed to a narrow crevice in the rock. They squeezed into the small space as the creature roared in frustration outside. As they caught their breath in the dim cave, Ethan slumped against the wall. "Okay," he panted, "I officially hate this game." Seraphine settled beside him, her wings rustling softly. "You handled yourself well, for someone unused to such dangers." Ethan couldn't help but grin, despite the exhaustion. "Thanks, I think." They sat in silence for a while, the tension between them easing just slightly. Ethan's thoughts raced, but one question kept surfacing. "Hey, Seraphine," he asked quietly, "is it even possible for a human and a celestial to, have a relationship?" Her eyes widened, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. "That is an intimate question. Our species share some similarities, but such a union has never been attempted." Ethan tried to act casual, but his heart raced. "Right? Just curious?" Seraphine studied him intently, her silver eyes reflecting something new. "I must admit, I find you intriguing, Ethan. Humans are unexpected." Ethan felt a flutter in his chest. This was no game, and somehow he had forged a connection with this beautiful, angelic being. But as the looming war threatened, that bond would either save them or destroy both their worlds. The cave was silent except for the sound of their breathing. Ethan sat across from Seraphine, his mind racing in the darkness, lit only by the faint glow of her blue skin. His heart was still pounding from the chase, and the reality of his situation was finally sinking in. "Okay," Ethan finally broke the silence, running his hand through his hair. "I've been here for less than a day, and I've already pissed off an alien race, triggered an ancient portal, and nearly got eaten by a monster. How exactly do we fix this?" Seraphine tilted her head slightly, her silver eyes gleaming in the low light. "This situation is not easily remedied, human," she said, her voice calm but tinged with concern. "The Seraphim Council will see your presence as a threat. My sudden disappearance could escalate tensions that were already fragile between our worlds." Ethan leaned back against the cave wall, exhaling sharply. "So war, that's what's coming, isn't it?" Seraphine didn't answer immediately, her gaze fixed on the cave's entrance. Outside, the faint roars of the creature that had chased them still echoed through the jungle, but it seemed far enough away for now. "The council will assume the worst, yes. My abduction will be seen as an act of aggression. The Seraphim are not a violent people by nature, but we have enemies who would take advantage of this chaos." Ethan's stomach turned. "I didn't mean to kidnap you," he muttered, his voice small. Seraphine's gaze softened, and she unfolded her wings slightly, the soft rustling breaking the silence. "I do not believe you intended harm, Ethan, but intent matters little in the face of what has already been set in motion." Ethan swallowed hard, feeling the weight of responsibility crushing him. "So, what do we do? I mean, there has to be a way to get you back home without starting an intergalactic war." Seraphine shifted her wings and moved closer, her presence calming despite the dire situation. "There may be a way. The portal network you activated is ancient, but not forgotten. If we can locate the main nexus, we might be able to use it to return me to Celestia without detection." "And where's this nexus?" Ethan asked, hopeful for the first time since everything had gone sideways. Seraphine's expression grew somber. "It's not far, but the journey will not be easy. The nexus is located deep within a forbidden territory, a region that no celestial has ventured into in millennia. It is controlled by a rival species, the Veilcar. If they discover us—" "Let me guess," Ethan interrupted with a wry smile. They're not exactly fans of humans either. Seraphine gave a small nod. The Veilcar are powerful and territorial. We must tread carefully if we hope to avoid drawing their attention. Great, Ethan sighed, trying to process the growing list of threats. Ancient alien tech, hostile creatures, intergalactic politics, and now a rival race. This is fine. Everything's fine. Seraphine looked at him curiously, her expression unreadable. Your tendency to make light of serious situations is strange. Yet, I find it strangely reassuring. Ethan chuckled, despite the circumstances. It's called sarcasm. Helps me not freak out. Her lips curved into the faintest of smiles. I am beginning to understand. For a moment, despite everything, Ethan felt a connection with Seraphine that transcended their differences. She was an otherworldly being, a celestial emissary. But here in this cave, they were just two souls trapped by circumstances beyond their control. We should rest, Seraphine said, her voice soft. We will need all our strength for the journey ahead. Ethan nodded, but as he settled against the cave wall, sleep seemed impossible. His mind was buzzing with thoughts of the portal, the Veilcar, and the war he had unwittingly sparked. But more than anything, his thoughts kept drifting back to Seraphine, her glowing blue skin, her graceful wings, and the strange but undeniable bond they seemed to be forming. His eyes closed for a moment, but they snapped open again when he heard a faint noise outside the cave. Seraphine's wings twitched as she, too, seemed to sense something. Do you hear that? Ethan whispered, his body tensing. Seraphine nodded, her eyes narrowing. Stay quiet. Something approaches. The sound grew louder, a rhythmic, clicking noise like claws scraping against stone. Whatever it was getting closer. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest as he strained to see through the dim light of the cave. He glanced at Seraphine, her face focused and calm, her wings slightly flared, ready to act. The noise stopped suddenly, just outside the cave entrance. The air grew heavy with tension. Then a voice, low, guttural, and speaking in a language Ethan couldn't understand. Seraphine's eyes widened slightly, and she whispered urgently, Veilcar scouts. Scouts? Ethan whispered back, panic rising in his throat. How did they find us? They likely detected the portal activation, she murmured, her wings trembling slightly as she crouched low. If they enter the cave, we will have no choice but to fight. Ethan's stomach dropped. He was no warrior, no hero. He'd barely survived the Void Stalker chase, and now he was supposed to face alien soldiers? He scanned the cave, looking for anything that could be used as a weapon, but it was barren. The clicking started again, this time closer. Seraphine gave him a look, her expression a mix of determination and urgency. If they find us, stay behind me. Ethan nodded, his mouth dry. Got it? A shadow appeared at the entrance, dark and menacing, the outline of a tall figure with multiple limbs and glowing red eyes. The Veilcar scout stepped into the cave, its voice low and growling. Seraphine's wings flared wide, casting a brilliant blue light across the cave walls. Ethan watched in awe as she rose to her full height, her entire presence radiating power. The scout hissed, its eyes narrowing as it locked onto Seraphine. For a moment, there was a tense silence, the two beings staring each other down. Then, with a sharp, guttural command, the scout charged. Ethan barely had time to react before Seraphine moved like lightning, her wings propelling her forward. She met the Veilcar head-on, her hand glowing with energy as she deflected its attack. Ethan scrambled backward, trying to stay out of the way as the two beings clashed in a flurry of movement. Feathers, claws, and flashes of light. Seraphine's power was breathtaking. She moved with a grace and ferocity Ethan had never seen, her wings slicing through the air as she countered every move of the Veilcar scout. But it was relentless, its multiple limbs giving it an advantage in close combat. Ethan's heart raced as he watched, feeling utterly useless. But then he saw it, a small rock on the cave floor, just within reach. It wasn't much, but it was something. Without thinking, he grabbed the rock and hurled it at the Veilcar. It struck the creature's side, just enough to distract it for a split second. That was all Seraphine needed. With a powerful sweep of her wings, she unleashed a burst of energy that sent the scout crashing into the cave wall. It slumped to the ground, motionless. Breathing heavily, Seraphine turned to Ethan, her wings folding back against her body. "Are you hurt?" Ethan shook his head, still trying to catch his breath. "No, I'm good. Thanks to you." She offered him a small smile, though her eyes remained serious. "We need to move. More will come." Ethan nodded, standing shakily. "Right? Let's get out of here." As they made their way deeper into the cave system, Ethan couldn't help but glance at Seraphine, awestruck by her strength and poise. The reality of their situation was terrifying, but for the first time, Ethan felt a flicker of hope. They were in this together, and together they just might survive. The flickering light from Seraphine's wings cast strange shadows on the cavern walls as they navigated deeper into the cave system. The air was damp and cool, and the eerie silence pressed in on Ethan as he followed closely behind her. His mind was still racing from the encounter with the Veilcar scout. The image of Seraphine in battle, fierce, angelic, and utterly powerful, was burned into his memory. "Are we close?" Ethan asked, his voice breaking the tension-filled quiet. Seraphine paused for a moment, as if sensing something in the air. "Closer," she whispered, "but I fear it won't be long before more scouts track us. We must move quickly." Ethan quickened his pace, trying to push down the nervous energy rising in his chest. The deeper they went, the more otherworldly their surroundings became. The walls of the cave were no longer just stone, but had started to shimmer with an iridescent glow, faint pulses of light running along them like veins. "Is this part of the portal network?" Ethan asked, reaching out to touch the glowing surface. It felt warm beneath his fingers, as if the cave itself was alive. Seraphine glanced back at him, her expression unreadable. "It is connected, yes. This network was built by ancient civilizations long before my time, stretching across galaxies. It taps into the lifeblood of the universe, the same energy that powers my world." She hesitated. "But it is also dangerous. We do not fully understand its origins." Ethan swallowed hard. "Dangerous how?" Seraphine looked away, her wings rustling softly. "The network can manipulate time and space. If used improperly, it could tear rifts between dimensions, pulling beings into realms from which there is no return. The Veilcar once sought to harness it for conquest, but they failed, and in their failure, they nearly destroyed themselves." Ethan felt a cold chill run down his spine. "And now we're heading straight into the heart of it." She nodded. "It is our only hope. If we can activate the Nexus, I may be able to return to Celestia before the Seraphim Council declares war. But the Veilcar will stop at nothing to control it. If they reach the Nexus first, we're screwed." Ethan finished for her. "Yes," Seraphine said softly, her gaze distant. "But there is another concern. The energy in the Nexus could react unpredictably with the technology that brought you here. It may have already destabilized the balance between our realities." Ethan's gut twisted. "So, this whole mess could be my fault?" She turned to him, her expression softening. "You could not have known. The boundaries between our worlds were never meant to be crossed this way. But now, we must focus on what is ahead." Ethan took a deep breath. "Right? No pressure." They pressed on, moving faster now. The glow of the cave walls intensified, illuminating their path. Every now and then, Ethan thought he saw flashes of movement out of the corner of his eye, dark shapes darting between the rocks. He tried to ignore them, focusing instead on Seraphine's confident steps. Finally, after what felt like hours, the tunnel opened into a vast chamber. Ethan's breath caught in his throat as he looked around. They had entered a massive underground space, the ceiling stretching high above, disappearing into darkness. In the center of the chamber stood a colossal structure, a circular platform made of shimmering metal, covered in alien symbols that seemed to pulse with energy. Above it, a vortex of light swirled, crackling with power. "The Nexus," Seraphine whispered, her eyes wide with awe. Ethan stared in disbelief. "This thing can take us to your home world?" It can, Seraphine said, moving toward the platform. If we activate it properly, I can return to Celestia. But there is little time. We must hurry before the Veil car arrive. Ethan followed her, but unease crept over him. The sheer scale of the Nexus was overwhelming, and the energy in the air felt almost alive, watching, waiting. Seraphine stepped up onto the platform, her wings spreading wide as she began to chant softly in a language Ethan didn't understand. Symbols on the platform began to glow brighter in response to her words, the vortex above them spinning faster. Ethan could feel the hair on the back of his neck stand up. The power here was immense, almost unbearable. But just as the energy seemed to reach a peak, a deafening roar echoed through the chamber. Seraphine froze, her eyes snapping toward the tunnel entrance. "They've found us," she breathed. Ethan turned to see dark shapes flooding into the chamber. More Veilcar scouts, their eyes glowing red in the darkness. They moved quickly, their bodies a blur of limbs and claws, cutting through the shadows like predators. "We're out of time," Ethan said, panic rising in his chest. Seraphine's expression hardened. "We must activate the Nexus now. I will hold them off." "You? No way." Ethan interrupted, stepping toward her. "I'm not leaving you to fight them alone." She gave him a sharp look. "You must. Only I know how to manipulate the Nexus. You're needed for this." Before Ethan could protest, Seraphine raised her hand, a blast of energy erupting from her palm and slamming into the first wave of Veilcar. They shrieked in fury but kept advancing, undeterred. "Ethan!" Seraphine shouted over the growing chaos. "Focus on the symbols. Match them to the ones that glowed when I chanted. The sequence must be precise." Ethan's heart raced as he looked down at the platform. Symbols flickered in and out of view, and he quickly realized they were shifting, as if testing his memory. His hands shook as he began tapping the symbols, trying to match them to the ones he had seen glow earlier. Behind him, the battle raged. Seraphine was a whirlwind of light and power, her wings creating a shield of energy as she fought off the Veilcar. But there were too many of them, and for every one she struck down, two more seemed to take its place. Come on," Ethan muttered to himself, desperately trying to complete the sequence. His fingers fumbled on the symbols, but one by one, they began to light up in the correct pattern. The ground beneath him started to shake, and the air hummed with power. The vortex above the platform spun faster, glowing brighter than before. "I've got it," Ethan shouted, his voice barely audible over the roar of energy. Seraphine glanced back at him, a mixture of relief and determination in her eyes. "Hold on." The moment Ethan completed the sequence, a blinding light erupted from the Nexus, enveloping the entire chamber. He could feel the ground shift beneath him as the portal's energy surged, pulling at the fabric of reality itself. The Veilcar screeched in fury, their advance halted by the immense power of the Nexus. But then, something went wrong. The light flickered, the vortex sputtering as if struggling to maintain stability. Seraphine's eyes widened in alarm. "No, the connection isn't stable." Ethan barely had time to react before the ground gave way beneath his feet. He felt himself falling, the world dissolving into light and shadow. "Seraphine," he shouted, reaching for her. But her voice was lost in the roar of the collapsing portal, and everything went dark. When Ethan came to, he was lying on soft grass, the scent of alien flowers filling his senses. The world around him was quiet, peaceful. Above him, a violet sky stretched out, with two moons hanging low on the horizon. He sat up slowly, his body aching from the fall. The portal had sent him somewhere. But where? And more importantly, where was Seraphine? "Seraphine," he called out, his voice echoing in the still air. There was no answer. Panic gripped his chest as he scrambled to his feet, searching the landscape for any sign of her. But all he saw were the strange, towering crystalline spires in the distance and the barren terrain stretching out before him. He was alone, and Seraphine was gone. Ethan's breath came in shallow bursts as he scanned the alien landscape. The violet sky above, with its twin moons hanging low, should have been serene, but it only heightened his panic. Seraphine was gone. How could she be gone? He had to find her. He wasn't even sure what world he was on. Was it Celestia or somewhere else entirely? The Nexus had malfunctioned, tearing them apart in the process. Now he was stranded and alone, with no idea where or how to start searching for her. He felt the weight of despair pressing in on him. What if she had been sent to a different dimension, or worse, trapped in the void between realities? He shook his head, refusing to give in to fear. He wasn't going to leave her behind, not after everything they had been through. Ethan took a step forward, forcing himself to move despite the panic swirling in his chest. The terrain was rocky and barren, but in the distance, those crystalline spires beckoned to him, their surfaces gleaming in the light of the two moons. They seemed familiar, like the ones in the Celestian vision Seraphine had described to him earlier. With no other direction to go, he started walking toward the spires, hoping against hope that they would hold some kind of answer. As he moved, his mind replayed the events leading up to this moment. The battles, the portal, the strange connection he had felt to Seraphine. It had all happened so fast, and yet the bond they had formed felt deep, unshakable. In such a short time, they had become more than just allies. He thought back to their conversations, to the way her silver eyes had pierced his soul, and the warmth of her wings when she had pulled him close to protect him. He couldn't let go of the possibility that there was something more between them, something he wasn't ready to lose. Hours passed, or perhaps only minutes. Time was hard to gauge in this strange place. But eventually, Ethan reached the base of the spires. Up close, the crystals hummed with energy, vibrating faintly beneath his fingertips when he touched them. The ground here was different too, soft, almost spongy, as if alive. Suddenly, a low hum filled the air, similar to the sound of the Nexus before it had collapsed. Ethan's pulse quickened as he spun around, trying to locate the source. His heart skipped a beat when he saw her, Seraphine, standing a few paces away, her wings shimmering in the light. "Seraphine!" Ethan shouted, rushing toward her. But something was wrong. Seraphine stood still, her expression distant, her eyes unfocused. As Ethan approached, he realized that she wasn't alone. A figure loomed behind her, a Veilcar general, towering and menacing, his dark form stark against the shimmering crystals. "No!" Ethan yelled, reaching out as the Veilcar's claws wrapped around Seraphine's shoulders, holding her in place. Seraphine's eyes met Ethan's, and for a moment, there was a flicker of recognition. But she didn't move, as though she were trapped under the Veilcar's control. The general sneered, his red eyes glowing with malice. "You've come too far, human. This ends here." Ethan's fists clenched. "Let her go." The Veilcar's grip tightened, and Seraphine winced. "She belongs to us now. The power of the Nexus has bound her to the Veilcar." "You're too late." Ethan's mind raced. He couldn't let this happen. There had to be a way to break the Veilcar's hold on her. But how? His eyes darted to the glowing crystals around them. They were humming with the same energy as the Nexus. An idea formed in his mind, wild and desperate. Without thinking, Ethan lunged toward one of the largest crystals, placing both hands on its surface. The energy surged through him, vibrating through every cell of his body. It was overwhelming, almost too much to bear, but he held on, focusing on Seraphine. "Seraphine," he shouted, his voice raw with emotion. "Fight it. I know you're still in there." For a moment, nothing happened. The Veilcar general laughed, his voice cruel and mocking. But then, slowly, Seraphine's wings began to glow brighter, the silver light intensifying. Her gaze sharpened, locking onto Ethan's with renewed clarity. "Yes," Ethan urged, his voice shaking. "You can break free." The energy from the crystals began to pulse in rhythm with Seraphine's wings, as if responding to her. The Veilcar general's expression shifted from smugness to fear as the light around Seraphine grew blindingly bright. "No," the general hissed, trying to pull Seraphine away. But it was too late. With a cry that echoed through the chamber, Seraphine unleashed a wave of pure energy, breaking the Veilcar's grip and sending him flying backward. The force of the blast knocked Ethan to the ground, but he didn't care. He watched in awe as Seraphine's wings unfurled fully, shimmering with a radiant power he had never seen before. The Veilcar general scrambled to his feet, but before he could make another move, Seraphine raised her hand. A beam of light shot from her palm, striking him square in the chest. He screamed in agony as his form disintegrated into nothingness, leaving only a faint shadow in his wake. Silence fell over the chamber. The only sound was the soft hum of the crystals and the faint rustling of Seraphine's wings as they folded gently behind her. Ethan staggered to his feet, his heart racing. "Seraphine?" She turned to him, her silver eyes soft and warm. "You saved me," she whispered. He shook his head, still trying to catch his breath. "No, we saved each other." Seraphine smiled, a rare, radiant smile that made Ethan's chest tighten. She stepped toward him, her hand reaching out to gently touch his face. "I never thought a human could do what you've done," she murmured. "You've changed everything." Ethan felt a warmth spread through him at her words. "I couldn't just leave you. I couldn't lose you." For a moment, they stood there, the weight of everything they had been through hanging between them. Then, slowly, Seraphine leaned closer, her lips brushing against his in a soft, tentative kiss. Ethan's heart soared, and he pulled her closer, deepening the kiss as the world around them seemed to fade away. When they finally pulled apart, Seraphine's eyes shone with a mixture of relief and something else, something deeper. "We have to return to Celestia," she said softly. "There's still much to do. But first, we must ensure the Nexus is stabilized." Ethan nodded, though he couldn't help but smile at the thought of whatever the future held for them, together. "Let's finish this." With a shared glance, they turned toward the Nexus, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that together, they could overcome anything. And as they stepped onto the platform, hand in hand, the Nexus began to hum with renewed energy, preparing to transport them to a new chapter in their intertwined destinies. This was only the beginning, but for now, they had won. The war was still on the horizon, but Ethan and Seraphine would face it together. And that was all that mattered.